the WGEA 2022-23 Gender Equality Scorecard. Really pleased to release the information today, and the headline is that the gender pay gap has decreased by 1.1 percentage point from 22.8 to 21.7, and this is encouraging. It's been driven by an increase in the proportion of women, particularly in senior management positions and in manager roles overall, and the corresponding increase in pay that comes with that. We've also, of course, got a context where there's increased debate and discussion in relation to gender equality across the board. We've got a tight labour market driving employers to really be looking to invest in and appreciate the full capabilities of their workforce, and also, of course, the impending legislative reforms with the publishing of employer gender pay gaps early next year. But we can't take this improvement for granted or assume that this trend will continue. We need to make sure we take purposeful action and targeted effort on the right areas. And that does mean getting more women into management and leadership roles and fixing those pay differences. But that's only a start. It's not the full solution. And we really need to make sure that we are recalibrating composition across jobs and occupations at all levels. We're still seeing that of the lowest quartile of pay, women are 50% more likely to be in that quartile, and men, there's double the number of men in the top quartile of earnings as there are women. So we need to really interrogate why, at an employer level, at an industry level, and really even at a national level, why leadership and management positions are synonymous with full-time work, and that's typically a male perspective, that part-time positions are synonymous with women and connected to primary caring responsibilities, and that so many of our jobs and occupations are associated with one gender. We need to make sure that employers are doing a gender pay gap analysis, really is the first critical step to understand what is driving those differences, what are the unique drivers in their environment, and develop action plans so that we can change the gender equal experience of employees. Policies need to be changed, processes, and importantly, culture that sits underneath the environment in which we work, so that the outcomes can be changed, so that everyone is having that gender equal experience in the workplace. So let me give you one example of some of the data that we've released today. We are seeing an important shift in relation to paid parental leave. So 63% of all employers in the WGEA data set are now offering paid parental leave in some form. And what is important is there's been a shift from a quarter to a third of those who are offering it what we're calling universally. They're offering it equally to men and women and removing the distinction between primary and secondary carers, so that men and women can equally access the paid parental leave. Interestingly, though, we haven't seen a corresponding increase yet in the take-up by men of paid parental leave. So we've only had a very, very small increase to 14% of all the paid parental leave being taken by men. So we've got the policies in place, but the translation of that through to the experience in the workplace is not yet translating, and we need to remove the stigma and the stereotypes that are connected with taking paid parental leave, and this extends to flexible work as well, so that we make sure that men and women equally can take parental leave and know that when they return, they are well placed to balance work and caring responsibilities in a way that doesn't place a handbrake on their careers, their contributions, and their capabilities for the future. So there's a lot of interesting information in here. We've seen progress on a number of fronts, as I've mentioned. We've also seen some areas that are stagnating. So we haven't seen an increase in boards. We haven't seen an increase in CEOs. In fact, we've slightly gone backwards in relation to women on boards. And, the translation, as I've said, of the policies and practices into outcomes is important translation that we have to make sure is happening in workplaces. So I might stop there in terms of a summary of the results, and Lucy, our Head of Comms and Campaigns, is going to help with some questions. Have we had some questions on the chat yet, Lucy?
Yes, definitely. So the first question is, you talked a little bit about changes in data to paid parental leave. How does paid parental leave help close the gender pay gap?
So paid parental leave is a fundamental context in which we know whether there's a gender equal experience in the workplace. And we know, of course, that the time out of the workforce that women take is one of the key 3 drivers in driving the gender pay gap. So if we can normalise that men and women both take parental leave, it not only helps normalise that experience in the workplace and remove some of the barriers to returning from parental leave, engaging in the workforce in a flexible way, that isn't just something that women experience, but that men experience too. And we see in some, of our leading employers, promotions happening while women and men are on parental leave, and recruitment happening even when people are pregnant, for example, and that there's no qualifying. The qualifying period for parental leave has been removed in some employers as well. So the ability to take leave and balance those caring and parental responsibilities with positive careers is a really fundamental way of demonstrating the gender equal experience in the workplace, making sure women can use their full range of skills and capabilities at the highest level, and therefore having those highly remunerated roles and reducing the gender pay gap.
Thanks. Another question is, you talk a lot about what employers can do to help close the gender pay gap. What can employees do to make sure that their employers are prioritising gender equality?
So it's a really great question, because it is important. Everyone has a role in terms of gender equality, and we actually really importantly say to employers they should be consulting with employees and hearing from employees about their experiences on a day-to-day basis. And those employee experience surveys are really an important part of feedback for employers about what's limiting or creating opportunities for men and women in the workplace. The second thing I'd say is our new Data Explorer, which we've launched today on the WGEA website, has an amazing amount of information in relation to employers. So you can go and look at your employer and see their performance in relation to workforce composition, policies, practices, parental leave, board structures, all of those sorts of things. And for prospective employers, you can also have a look at a job you might be considering and understand what the gender equality environment is like in that employer. And early next year, we'll also be publishing employer gender pay gaps. So that'll be another piece of information as a proxy for gender equality about how employers are performing. So we advise employees, get informed, get the information, make sure when the opportunity arises, put the feedback in to your employer, and generate those conversations amongst your peers, with your manager, with HR, about what's happening in relation to gender equality in the workplace. And the last thing I'd say is for managers, the experience of a gender equal environment is most driven in teams, the day-to-day experience of an employee. And so if you're managing people, it's really fundamental that you understand how you can lead that team in a way that creates that gender equal experience, demonstrate it in your own team, and that will help to demonstrate it to others within your employer as well.
Great. Here's a question on women in leadership. Can you identify systemic failures that continue to contribute to the imbalance in women in leadership and boards? Is that at the recruitment stage or other areas?
See, the thing about this is that it happens in different ways for different employers. And that's why it's so fundamental that an employer does a gender pay gap analysis to understand what are the drivers within their organisation. Some of it also happens at an industry level, and we do see a lot of masculinised industries with very significant portion of the whole workforce being male, needing to address the stereotypes of women working in those industries, for example. So there's a way that industries can tackle some of the underlying issues collectively, as well as the work that individual employers need to do. And it could be a recruitment, it could be a retention issue, it could be a promotion issue, it could be the capacity for women to work flexibly or in a way part-time, for example. At the moment, what we see is that 22% of non-managers work part-time, and that's predominantly women, but only 7% of managers are part-time, and 80% of those part-time managers are women. So part-time work is highly feminised, and if you can't progress to more senior levels in a way that you want to or need to work, that is limiting both an individual's capacity to pursue their career, but it's also very limiting from an employer perspective because you're not really utilising the capabilities of that individual. So do the analysis, understand what's driving the differential, and put in place the plans to address it, which will be different in every employer.
Excellent. And how can we address, we did a little bit of a pre-release on part-time work. How can we address the disadvantages that people who need to work part-time face?
This is a cultural and area and an area where stigma, that the idea that there's an incompatibility between a part-time manager or part-time work and managerial positions. And it's a bit of this old ideal worker notion that the ideal worker is available, at all hours, very flexibly, at any time of day, and has someone else generally at home if there's other responsibilities looking after that side of things. So we do need to look at redesigning roles, thinking genuinely about how they could be designed in a way that enables part-time work to happen, so that women don't languish in more junior positions than they're capable of fulfilling. Some of the partnership and professional advisory services are doing really interesting work in this way, and not only setting up their teams in a way that enables part-time work or job share roles, but also advising clients that this manager works 3 days a week, so that's when you engage, and the team will be working at the other times when they're not available, so you'll still get the quality of the outcome. So it is thinking about how to do things differently, design roles differently, and not just try and do what happens all too often is say, yeah, sure, you can work 3 days or 4 days, but we're still expecting you to get the same amount of work done. We really fundamentally need to change that so that there can be a compatibility between leadership and management and part-time work.
So we've got one final question before we wrap it up. You referred to the top 3 drivers of the gender pay gap, parental leave being one of them. From Wajea's perspective, what are the other 2 that you are seeing?
So this is some work we've done with KPMG over an extended period of time, and it's always the same 3 drivers. It's our industrial and occupational structure, the fact that we have so many women working in lower paid roles and men working in higher paid roles and industries. So, mining is predominantly men and it's our highest paying industry. Things like healthcare and social assistance, 80% women, and one of our lower paid industries. So that's a big driver. The second is the time out of the workforce that women take. So that is a driver, as you've said, of parental leave, but it's also broader than that. It's about returning to work. It's about being able to work at the most senior levels, especially if you're trying to balance caring responsibilities at the same time, and having those opportunities to progress and not being sidelined. And the third thing is bias and discrimination. It is back to the from day one, the recruitment, the promotion, the pay rises, the opportunities to step up and make that contribution at the highest level. They're the 3 big drivers of the gender pay gap. And there's work that employers and industries can do to address all of them, depending on which are more predominant than others in terms of driving a specific employer gender pay gap. Looks like we're finishing up there. Thanks everyone for joining us today on our LinkedIn Live, and please have a look at the scorecard. It's available on our website, and have a look at the Data Explorer. It's new, improved, it works fast, and the ability to compare between industries and employers is a new capacity that's there. So you can really see the performance across the board, and that transparency and accountability, we think, is really important to helping drive change. Thanks a lot.